This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider, presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and Shawn McFarland. We're having a little baseball roundtable. We've been having a lot of those recently, but it turns out they're playing pretty well. So we're going to talk about that and what they've done so far, and about the home opener this weekend. But before we get to that, we want to cover a couple of other things. First of all, how's everybody's bracket doing? How'd y'all do, boys?
I didn't make a bracket.
I'm in the women's bracket.
Oh, Shawn, come on, man.
I was busy in spring training trying to document these Rangers. I would have picked UConn, though. So I feel good about that. So in my fictional bracket in my head, I'm crushing it right now.
Well, you were a UConn guy. You covered UConn, so that's a prejudice there. I had the 3 1s and a 2. I had Michigan, Duke, and Arizona, and then Houston. Houston was the number 2. Even at the way that it turned out, you still had 2 1s, a 2, and a 3. So it's not like we have real Cinderellas here. I mean, UConn's getting a lot of love because of the last second shot. Which frankly should never have happened. Caden Boozer tries to make that pass over the top of those 2 guys. What in the world he's thinking on that, I don't know. Just hold on to the ball, son, and you hold it for another couple of seconds, and the game is over, and you win. But anyway, you'll have to live with that. I'm sorry that kind of thing happens to somebody.
I just took UConn in all my brackets, men's, women's, all the brackets.
Really?
Yeah.
You got them in the MLB bracket?
No, they haven't had a great baseball player, I don't think, since Mike Olt, former Ranger great.
You're leaving
Mike
out
Olt
Rangers
from UConn?
Yeah, you're leaving out Rangers legend Nick Ahmed.
That's correct.
Ahmed, wow.
I mean, Springfield, Massachusetts zone. I don't know. It's not a good look.
I think if we went back and compared Mike Olt and Nick Ahmed MLB careers, we probably wouldn't end up with a great player. George Springer was a UConn guy, right?
He was. Yep.
I think that's right. That's right.
Let's go with George Springer.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So real quickly, who you got then for winning it all, and who's in the final?
UConn and somebody else. I'm going
You guys have really been paying attention.
I'll go UConn, Michigan on the men's side. I think I'll take Michigan because they've been beating everyone by 30 since the start of the season. I like that Yaxel Lindenborg kid who's like a 25-year-old. I feel like that plays pretty well when you're going against 18-year-olds. But I don't know. I like this. Yeah. The UConn, this is not the best. I don't think the best team that Dan Hurley has had in his time here. But there's something to be said about a team that's now made 3 Final Fours in a 4-year span and won twice, and probably has the coaching edge on any team in the country. So I'll take UConn, Michigan in the championship, and I'll go Michigan. But I won't be surprised if I'm very wrong.
Sucking up to Scott Bell in the old newsroom there.
That's my championship game too, Michigan over UConn. I don't even think it's going to be close. Although this is the kind of thing that just sets up an upset, doesn't it? When a team, as you said, has been winning big the entire tournament like Michigan has, they roll into the final and then boom, something happens. And I will say the winning shot for UConn over Duke by Braylon Mullins, that guy has a beautiful shot. And he's going to be a tremendous NBA player, I think. So we'll see. He was just a freshman this year. So
I just also want to say very quickly that while, it's great for you to break down all these beautiful shots and all these things, but while that was going on, Shawn and I were covering baseball. We were busy doing our jobs.
Watching sports is my job.
Yeah, but you weren't writing about it. We were writing about the Rangers and
I'll be writing about it eventually.
The Texas
Those
Rangers
things were all coming along eventually. Evan, your bitterness does not look good on you. I know you wear it like a cloak, but I would like you to at least shed that a little bit and try to be gracious about what an old man is getting to do here at the end of his life. Instead,
Well, I understand that you're at the end of your life, Kevin. And I don't know. It feels like Barry White has inhabited your body. Are you a little under the weather?
I'm a little under the weather. I'm having a little allergy here. So, yeah. Debbie's really liking it. She likes the whole Barry White thing.
Hello, I'm Kevin Sherrington, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to
it's a good
fine tunes for you tonight.
All right, let's. We had some other news develop yesterday on a local podcast with the former mayor of Dallas, Mark Cuban, was asked about, I guess, selling if he had any regrets, and he said his regret was not that he sold the team, but who he sold the team to. And then he said he really wouldn't say anything more about it, that other than just that I made a lot of mistakes in this deal. And, I will Mark, the older Mark gets, the more likely he is to admit his mistakes that he was early on here in his tenure in Dallas. And but not to have seen all this coming was just foolishness on his part. And maybe not, he couldn't have known the extent of all of it. But from the day that was announced, that the team had been sold, and he was saying that he was still in charge. I wrote a column that night saying that he has no idea what he's getting into here, that these people didn't come in here to watch their money burn. They came in here to run this thing and of course, obviously, to get a casino out of it. And I don't think Mark had any problem with that. And I think, as a matter of fact, he was encouraged by it because he's going to have 27% of whatever that casino delivered eventually. As a minority owner. But
I don't think he thought that they'd have the blatant disregard for the city that they have shown.
I don't know that I would call it a blatant disregard for the city. They sanctioned a trade. Just that was just a huge mistake on Patrick Dumont's part. But he's being loyal to the guy who just led had put together the team that had gone to the finals, and in his own way, he's admitting, I don't know anything about basketball. And he went along with the GM. That was always the problem when Mark was the owner. He was always overruling his GM, and most often to the detriment of the team in some of the deals that happened or didn't happen when he was the owner of the team. So it was a big admission on his part. And the really interesting thing is that, I know the relationship has really soured between Mark and the Adelson Dumont clan. But I mean, it seems like now that's irrevocably broken at this point. I don't see any way that he gets back in their good graces after saying that.
No, it's ruptured, and he knows it. But I do also think that, he's got the self-awareness as he gets into his 60s that he's willing to acknowledge mistakes. And for whatever reason, listen, I'm not, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not crazy about Patrick Dumont, but I'm not crazy. I'm not going to hold Patrick Dumont terribly responsible for the Luka trade. That falls on the shoulders of the GM. You do give a GM control of your basketball or baseball operations, and you trust his decision-making. And I think it would have been an overreach for Dumont to step in there. Maybe a necessary overreach, but it would have been an overreach. But I feel at this point in time, Mark has shown a pretty strong desire to make Dallas a better place. And I think he feels at this point that the Mavericks right now are a organization that's not really committed to making the area a better place, only to lining their own pockets. And look, that's what all owners want, is to line their own pockets. But there are some people who are better at also making the landing a little bit easier for the community around them.
Yeah, we'll see. There's no question they're in it for the money. But that just because you're in it for the money doesn't mean it can't make things better.
Correct.
I was having a conversation yesterday with Tom Schieffer because I'm writing a column about all the city's multiple issues with its pro sports teams and trying to find a place for them to play, making commitments they can't live up to, and so I was going to revisit with Tom when the Rangers discussed the possibility of moving the club to Dallas, and it was an interesting conversation. I've always thought that Dallas didn't do nearly enough to try to make that happen. Tom kind of made it clear that probably wasn't going to happen no matter what. But it didn't, in my mind, spare Dallas the fact that they just didn't try hard enough. If you line up the individuals in the history of both of the Rangers organization at the time, and then also the Dallas City leaders at the time, you had first of all Tom Vandergriff who had the wherewithal to bring the Rangers to Arlington, and then Richard Green who was going to do everything he possibly could to keep them. And
Sure.
Dallas
And
never
also,
had leaders like that.
look, and on both occasions, the Rangers have operated more out of fear for what they might lose in terms of mid-cities and Fort Worth fan bases rather than embracing what they might gain by going to Dallas. And I think that tactically it was a mistake on the Rangers on both fronts. Obviously, I wasn't here for the move into the ballpark in Arlington, but the most important part at that point was simply getting a quality stadium built, and they accomplished that. I think the next time around, it would have been, and by that point, Dallas had all its problems with its pension program and all that, but I think Dallas has missed the boat on, and I think the Rangers have too, on what they could have accomplished had they put a vibrant stadium into downtown Dallas.
Well, there are all kinds of things that could have happened possibly, but just to go back and of course, I was in charge at the morning news of the trying to keep up with all of that and what the issues were at the time, and it was kind of amazing just to hear what people would say in Dallas. Over an issue that was that big, I don't think anybody really realized the potential for what it could have been and what that could have done for Dallas to have had ball games 81 nights a year in downtown Dallas, and what that could have meant for Dallas then and now. Think about how that could have grown, because if you look at what happened with American Airlines Center and what that meant for that area around there, and when it went from a toxic waste dump to what it is now.
The 40,000 seat retractable roof arena in downtown Dallas, you'd had 81 nights of baseball. You'd have had another 20 nights of college baseball. You'd have any number of concerts that, outpace really arena concerts that are bigger than, that are Jerry World type concerts, and it's attractive to go into Dallas with a 40,000 seat stadium. There's any number of things that the Rangers could have done to increase their market share and their presence, and also build a real, I think a more, I don't want to detract anything from the Rangers fan base, but I also think that this is, and in a lot of ways it's a great thing that the Rangers really embrace the whole idea of families. But I do think that more and more teams moving into downtown spaces now are picking up that young adult fan base and making games much more of a club scene, and I think the Rangers did miss out on that to some extent. And I think that there are places where you can do both. You can have that kind of club type atmosphere, but you can also still cater to families.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't help either.
All right. All right. Well,
I was just going to say it doesn't help either that, again, speaking as a young person, obviously I'm not going to these games as a fan, but if I were, how do I get to Arlington if I'm going to be having a few beers? Like I can't drive. It's going to be $100 Uber. But if I'm in a city and I can walk out my apartment and walk to the game or take a $10 Uber, that just does so much for attracting young people. And I think about that with the Stars and Mavericks potentially leaving too. Like you lose that. So it's a bummer.
And that's an excellent point, Shawn. And that was the point that, I've always said this about Tom Hicks. We kind of butted heads about a lot of stuff, but I thought he was, right on when he said that, everybody thinks that because you're sitting in the middle of these two cities and in a pretty large city yourself, that, oh, well, that way you're getting access for all your fans. And he said, listen, most of our season ticket base is either in Dallas or in Collin County. And so those people are having to drive a long way to get to these games, and especially the ones from Collin County. And that was his primary move for moving his AA team from Tulsa to Frisco and building that stadium there. He said, so I was just trying to service all those baseball fans who just want to go to a baseball game. They don't, if it's not the big league, that's all right. And I thought of all the things that Tom did, that was the pure genius, was to do that, to recognize that and make that move. So, yes, Shawn, to your point, that's exactly the thing. Plus, you got to think about the walk up. If you're downtown and you're working downtown and it's 5:00 and somebody says, "Hey, let's go over to the Rangers game tonight," and you leave your car in the garage and you walk over there. How much of that do they get?
Yeah, it's all a great question. It is all a great question, but the bottom line is, if you put a winning product on the field, you're going to draw. The Orioles have a great facility in downtown, and it remains a gem, and they drew 11,000 last night. So the question still comes down to, what are you going to do to win? And I think that's a great place to jump off on what the Rangers are at to start this season.
That just real quickly, 11,000, what's that all about?
Yeah. It's a Monday night. The Rangers are never the biggest draw. They're certainly not the world champions. The weather had been dicey here, though it was really nice last night. And the Orioles are coming off a bad season. But it was a little bit shocking for me to see only 11,000. I will say this, Kevin, right? The Orioles opened at home, and so they were home all opening weekend. And they drew big crowds over that weekend, but it's school night, early in the season. All of those things, I think, factored into it. But
okay. Still, it's a baseball town.
If you win, I'm in Baltimore right now. In this town, if you win, that stadium is packed on March 30th, one way or another.
Well, it is, but it's also a baseball town. Like, I would put it. It's not St. Louis, but I would put it in the top 10 of baseball towns, wouldn't you?
It had always been a great baseball town. I think the last 20 years in which they have really not been very competitive for a lot of time, and the Angelos family was really struggling with the organization. I think they've lost a decent amount of their fan base. It's funny. I was riding down in the elevator. I don't know what the context of this conversation was, but a couple of stadium workers last night were in the elevator with me riding down from the press level. And I kind of get the context. I don't know what it was. Maybe they were talking about attendance, but they both said the football team they think of as the hood, and this place they think of as the suburbs. And I kind of like let out a chuckle, and they said, "You know what I'm talking?" I said, "I'm from Dallas. I'm not entirely sure, but it is." You're not going to get people to come in from the suburbs for Monday Night Baseball for a team that's not good.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, speaking of teams that are good and certainly look good right out of the gate, the Rangers, who had them winning 4 of their first 5 games? Not me.
I didn't. I thought it would be good for them to get out of this road trip 3-3. And as we tape this on Tuesday morning, they've got a chance to win this first season opening road trip to the East Coast. They've done a number of things in these first 4 games that we've seen that we didn't see a bunch of last year. They've scored runs. They've taken walks. Look, I mean, they're 3-1. And they didn't get a great start out of Nathan Eovaldi, and they haven't yet gotten a start out of Jacob deGrom, though he's scheduled to start on Tuesday night. But they are. I texted Skip Schumacher after the game last night, and I said, I got to tell you, this is just a fun team to watch right now because they're playing hard and with a purpose. And we can go back and cite any number of small instances over the first 4 games that really stand out. I think the one that stands out for me is Sunday Brandon Nimmo going hard into second base to break up a double play when the Rangers were leading that game already by 5 runs, and it was late in the game, but he got a great secondary lead. He went hard on the ground ball. He was able to make a legal, strong slide into second base, break up double play, and the upshot of all that is the Rangers got another important run in that inning. So these are just things that I haven't seen around this team. Even during the year that they won the World Series, I felt like they came out and they just, pulverized people. I didn't see a team that was as efficient and as dedicated to the process as I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, you're getting a little bit of everything here. I thought about during the World Series and the big left-hander made that great defensive play, and when I was watching Jacob Eunice do the same thing, he's going across the foul line and whips that throw back, and of course it's a great play by
by Berger.
By Berger as well, and of course they should point out they're playing so well that no one's talking about the fact that Berger dropped 2 pop flies, in that game, which was just brutal to watch.
It was brutal to watch, but we can both attest that it was blowing pretty hard in Philadelphia that day.
Yeah,
I'm sure it was, although it didn't seem to bother anybody else nearly as much as it did Berger. Your
favorite defensive outfielder, Adolis Garcia, also managed to drop a ball in that win.
Yeah, Adolis Garcia. That was kind of sad to watch Adolis in another uniform playing the Rangers. Although he played a key role in that was that game 2 where he got double. He got second line
after a drop pop fly.
Yeah, exactly. So, what impressed you the most, though? Was it their ability to put up runs early and get ahead? Was it the starting pitching? It surely wasn't the back end of the bullpen.
Well, are you saying you didn't have Tyler Alexander in the closer pool?
No, my gosh, he's just flipping frisbees up there. I mean, that is not what I'm thinking of. Plus, how old is he?
2 for 2, Kevin. He's 2 for 2.
How old is he anyway? He looks like he's 64. I mean, how old is the man?
He's in his early 30s.
He's early 30s.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Salt Lake Carroll's own.
He's like the most mild closer in baseball history.
Oh my gosh. If they continue to play this way, and obviously it's too soon to make a move now, but if they continue to play this well, Ray Davis has got to open up his wallet and let them go after a closer. Now, I guess my issue for you, let's talk about that, the back of the bullpen first, because there's just so much you can do here, and it was taxed because Latz had to start and all that, and we get it that there were some problems in that first series, but they got to get somebody. My question is, what do you dangle in front of someone? Is it a deal where you make a trade where you agree to take on the whole contract of somebody that's unattractive to another? Because what can you offer them in the way of material?
Listen, I 4 games into the season, a week into the season, I know where you're going. It's too late to talk about that and too early to talk about that because you missed the bus when guys were out there, right? You missed the bus when you could just do what you needed to do to get a closer. And now you're going to have to wait to see what teams really get off to a bad start. And I just don't know. Shawn can probably address this better than I can, given the fact that he kind of did the top 30 list for us. But I don't know what the Rangers have to dangle out there right now. Their top prospect is out for most of the season. Scarborough Green, their number 2 prospect, is, coming back from skin cancer and is still 6 weeks away from pitching.
Caden Scarborough.
What's that?
You said Scarborough Green.
I always do that. Ranger legend Scarborough Green. God, I'm so old. But Caden Scarborough. And so I don't know what kind of package they'd be able to dangle out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
Well,
I think that's something we ran into the deadline last year is there's such a gap between Sebastian Walcott, and even if you want to put Scarborough in that conversation for their premier prospects, there's such a gap between them and the next tier that there's so little to play with. They don't have a couple fringe top 100 guys to deal. Like I look at the Montgomery trade a few years ago, right? You had Thomas Sagisi and, Tako Arobi that were like, fringe top 100 guys that you could comfortably trade to make your team better. They don't have that tier of prospect right now, at least not yet. I mean, they have guys who are interesting guys that can develop into that, but it's just so thin in that second tier of prospects right now to go get a meaningful.
Well, that's the other thing,
arm.
right, Shawn? I mean, like you've got all those guys. I know Isaac Tiger was down during most of spring and Mark Church was down for much of spring, but you really need some of those like pitching prospects to take huge steps this year to either give you an internal option or give you some kind of trade collateral. But right now they don't have much of that. And that's why I advocated for, going after a short-term deal for somebody like Pete Fairbanks in the offseason. And it's why
Kyle Fairbanks.
Who?
Kyle Fairbanks.
Pete Fairbanks.
Pete Fairbanks. Okay. I thought you said Keith. I couldn't tell what you were saying. I'm sorry.
Pete Fairbanks.
I'm just going to hear and kind of chip away at all the names you say.
Or I think the guy that since I actually took the exercise seriously, Kevin, when we had to do our predictions in the paper and like listed an actual trade, I suggested that the Rangers might be able to go out and get Shawn Armstrong back at the deadline. And I know he's not an overpowering guy, but boy, he's good against right-handers, and he was really glue in that bullpen last year. And that's the kind of guy that, if a Cleveland team kind of bottoms out this year, that's the kind of guy who might be available fairly early for not a huge price.
So my problem with all this is that you can talk about waiting and waiting and waiting, but if you blow enough games here early and screw yourself in the first 25 games of the season, well, then you waited too long. I think they need to be able to they need to be looking right now, and I'm not sure that's going to develop into anything right away. And I'm sure that Chris Young he's always active in those kind of issues. But the worst thing that can happen is for fans to be watching this team play so well for 8 innings, only to cough it up in the 9th. There's nothing more demoralizing than that.
Well, that is all true, and they did do that in the 9th inning, but they rallied back in the 10th in Philadelphia. And last night, given the save situation, Tyler Alexander, even though it's not overpowering stuff, he got the job done quickly and rather uneventfully. So
yeah, but all right, let's move over and talk about the starting pitching now. So, for once you understand that, as we're taping this on Tuesday,
wait, I don't think you started to ask a question earlier, and I think it's important that Shawn and I both weigh in on this, and that was like, what's impressed us most so far. Okay. And Shawn, what has impressed you most so far?
I think just the quality of at bats, right? In that Philadelphia series, I think they averaged something like 4.1 pitches per plate appearance, which would have led baseball last year. Again, small sample size, but you're going against 3 really good pitchers in Sanchez, Nola, and Luzardo. I don't think there's a team in baseball that would have hit Sanchez on opening day. He was that good. So you can put that aside, but they had good quality at bats against Nola and Luzardo. They got to them early. The top of that lineup set a tone. And I know, Evan, you wrote about this. So you can probably talk more about this, but I've been really kind of taken aback in the last week by the number of players I've talked to who kind of unprompted have brought up Brandon Nimmo as a guy who has completely set the tone at the top of that lineup. It was the final exhibition, and I asked Jock Peterson just what he saw from the offense in spring and what looks different. And he said, I just think having Nimmo has made a huge impact. A guy who's going to battle in that first at-bat of the game or in that leadoff position. Jake Berger brought it up again, I think maybe it was Saturday night, about the impact he's had in having a guy that they didn't have last year who was going to go up there and fight. I think that bleeds through the rest of the lineup. And I think we've seen that the first 4 games is they're just more competitive at-bats than we really saw all of last year.
Yeah, the at-bats have been really good. And the thing I was going to single out was Brandon Nimmo, because he's had great at-bats. He's done a great job on the base running front. The contact play last night, again, same situation. It's a ground ball by chopper right back to the pitcher, but he'd gotten a great lead off of third base and went, had a great read on the ball and made a play at home that turned into a run and gave them more of a run scoring opportunity. It ended up being a crooked inning for him. So on that front, he's been a tone setter. I think at the top of the lineup, he's been a tone setter. I talked to Evan Carter a little bit about it yesterday, because that's obviously the connection that you draw, two left-handed hitters, both kind of speed guys, both plate discipline guys. And I also said, Evan, I'm not trying to make you, Brandon Nimmo's puppy dog here, but what have you learned? And the one thing that I do think stands out in all of this is, we can talk about the clubhouse dynamics all we want last year, but in the pitching staff, you had two guys who were really, really dialed in on helping teammates. And one was a guy who's a tactician, and Nathan Eovaldi, and very detailed. One is Jacob deGrom, who's very simple in his messaging. I think now you've got a guy in Brandon Nimmo who is that kind of Eovaldi guy for a lot of these hitters, and I think they have responded to it. Only other stat that I would bring up on Nimmo was, over that first weekend, he chased 5 pitches, 18.5% chase rate. And all 5 pitches were 2-strike pitches, the one time where the chase is advisable. So he's done everything right, and he has a plan for everything. And it's the first impressions are that it was a perfect fit for what this offense needed to try and get on track. You set the tone at the top of the lineup with really disciplined, grinding at bats. Kevin, last night they saw 181 pitches. 181 pitches in a 9-inning game. They did that 12 times last year. And they saw 180 or more pitches 12 times last year. 8 of them were in extra inning games. If you go to 9-inning games, it only happened 4 times. And they've done that in the first week. They beat an elite lefty in the first week, which is something that they didn't do all of last season, partly because Brandon Nimmo homered off of Jesus Luzardo, and he hits righties and lefties. So he's not a strict platoon guy. So that's been the single biggest eye-opener for me.
So how much of the ABS challenge is playing a part in the Rangers seeing more pitches, do you think?
I don't know that it's played a big part in them seeing more pitches. I think the Rangers I think it kind of dovetails a little bit with their team philosophy right now, which is to be very team-centric. And I think it's led to some guys being a little bit restrained when it comes to making challenges, hitters to making challenges. There was an instance on Saturday where Evan Carter made a challenge that was, falls in the quote unquote selfish category. 2 outs, nobody on. What was it, first pitch, Shawn, or was it a 1-1?
It wasn't first pitch.
I think it was for a second. It might have been a 1-1. I think you're right. It was a 1-1. Yeah.
And last night in the ninth inning last night, with 2 on and 2 outs, he gets an 0-0 pitch that is out of the zone, and he doesn't challenge it, even though it's called a strike. And I think that's an example right there that, even though that is more of a high leverage situation, he might be a little bit timid right now, because he was, they did talk to him about let's be wise and understand the situations. And Skip Schumacher has been very upfront with us about, and Shawn had asked him this stuff on Sunday, just about how they're approaching this. And Shawn, he had told you that it's a learning experience for all of them.
Yeah, it's we're 4 games in now. It's still a learning experience. I think, to your point, Evan, Skip kind of brought up, he's like, we have a lot of good guys on this team who might not want to be the one that burns it. Do you want to be the guy who burns a challenge in the 5th or 6th inning when we need to save them for later? And I think Skip was pretty upfront about that Evan Carter, without saying his name or throwing it under the bus, that, it's probably one that we'd like to save for later in the game. But I think it's still early. Guys are figuring out how to use it. They didn't, if you look at the totality of baseball in the spring, they were on the kind of that bottom quarter of teams that used it. They weren't using it a ton in the spring. I think it's going to be still a few more weeks to like get a real system down, kind of how they want to use it. Every team is going through that in terms of figuring out the best way to use it. But I do think it'll just be interesting to see how it all plays out, because it is, I think the interesting part that really Skip said was like, do guys want to be the ones that burn it? Because they do have good guys who are taking team-oriented at-bats.
But they're not doing it. It's not just on offense, though. They're not making. They're not challenging enough on defense either. The catchers aren't making enough challenges. What the early numbers have shown is that the hitters are the worst at it. Right? It's what you'd figure it'd be. Pitchers are the second worst at what you think, and the catchers are the ones who really need to be on the defensive side, making the challenges, and they're not doing that. There were several calls late in the game that they could have challenged, and they didn't. And I just think that I know you want to save them, but you have to realize, well, if I'm right, we got two more, and at some point they're just going to have to be more aggressive about it, because I think other teams are being aggressive, and you need to take advantage of the technology and what it's bringing to the game, because what it's done so far has been remarkable, I think. And if you look at the number of calls that have been overturned and the percentages of them, and it's kind of what I figured it would be like. And even that's not the ultimate answer about ABS. It's not about the number of calls that get overturned. It's the key calls that get overturned. You change a pitch here, a pitch there in the course of the game and reverse those can have unbelievable influences on a game. And I think that's the purpose it serves. And so I think they, I'm sure they're going to gather some more information, and then they're going to maybe hit a reset button on all of it. But for sure, in my mind, they're going to have to be more aggressive.
I don't know, Kevin. I mean, I think, yes, the Rangers have challenged the fewest among fielding teams through the first 4 games. I think part of this goes to what is the quality of umpire behind the plate. I think part of it goes to how many calls have really been questionable in high leverage situations. And I can't think of any where I was rushing back to the to look at the pitch box to say, boy, that really seemed like a miss here. I've seen more on the batter's side. I don't think that their use of ABS early on has been net positive or net negative so far. I do have a lot of confidence. And another thing, I think that Kyle Higashioka had 3 challenges in spring. He was one of, I think, 8 catchers that had at least 3 challenges during the spring from behind the plate who were perfect. And he's got a really good command of the strike zone. Last night was his second start. They've now split time pretty equally. But I think you'll see Kyle Higashioka challenging more. But, again, I mean, I haven't had a chance to just go back and look at strike percentages. I think the Rangers are filling up the zone pretty good. They're not walking, at least the starters aren't walking a ton of hitters.
Well, it's not that, as I said, it's not the number of times you challenge it. It's just the times that you just should challenge. I mean, it's as simple as that to me. There were a couple of times there were balls that looked like when you're setting up as a catcher, especially, and you're not making it. I was surprised there. I don't remember who he was pitching to. I want to say it was Junis that was pitching. And it was a ball up in the inside upper corner, and it was a strike, and it was called a ball. And to me, that should just be an automatic. If you're the catcher, you know that. I know that's a strike, and I think you got to challenge that. But we'll see going forward.
I mean, I think you're. I mean, I just think you're speaking in absolutes about something that we don't have any real feel for yet. All I can go back and look at is Junis has thrown 30 pitches in 3 innings. He's been as effective and efficient as anybody. And I don't know how many leverage situations there were in which there was a questionable call on him. But I do expect the Rangers, they haven't had CB Buckner yet. So when they get CB Buckner, we'll be on the lookout for a challenge show. The challenge, what's the right word? I'm looking for something that's alliterative here.
That's all right. Nice try. All right, let's see if there's anything else that we need to talk about. So let's talk about this week and the rest of this week. Of course, they've got the Orioles here, and then they'll come back home for the home opener this weekend. Everybody will be out there for that. That's for sure.
Kevin will be up in the press box, Shawn, telling us which pitches he should be challenged.
Yeah,
I think you should. I think after the game, you should walk down and with a list and just tell Skip, pitch 79.
You screwed up on the challenge.
88.
I think when you're dead last, that maybe that says you should be a little more aggressive. I don't know.
You know what would be good? I honestly, what would be good on Baseball Savant, and they do this. I think I need to go check there's a different umpire portal that's not officially run by MLB, but I'd like to go back and see, like, if you could do this per team, how many teams have had how many missed calls against them. I don't know that the ABS challenge system isn't going to show that. It's only going to show challenges, but I'm wondering how many missed calls the Rangers have had against them percentage-wise versus other teams. I mean, it obviously stood out with the C.B. Buckner game. There have been a couple other games where it stood out. And I don't think the Phillies challenged a ton in that first series either. So maybe it was just, circumstances, but it's certainly worth watching as this first month goes on. Just remember, look, last season, the first weekend of the year, everybody was talking about how torpedo bats were going to change baseball. And by the end of the year, the only time we were talking about a torpedo was when the U.S. was sinking an Iranian ship.
Oh, nice. Nice shot there. Okay, so is there anything else we need to cover here before we get out?
I think next week's going to be an important week for the Rangers too. They've got Seattle coming in. Seattle's caused them more problems than any team in baseball the last couple of years. And over a 2-week span, they've got 7 games against the Mariners. That's a really early chance to let the AL West know we're here and we mean business. The Rangers first 9 games are against teams not in their division, so it'll be their first games against teams in the division. And like we said, the Rangers' numbers in Seattle, where they go the week after, are terrible the last 4 years. The Rangers' numbers against the Mariners overall have been really poor. So I'm looking forward to how that series shakes out.
I think for me, we're only going to get one home series before they head back on the road. But I guess this first month, it'll be interesting to watch how they hit at home. Obviously, that was such a detriment last year, was the park effect and what that looked like. And, does this offense look as potent on the road does this offense look as potent at home as it has on the road? And just what's that going to look like? Because that was such a killer for them was they just weren't as good of an offense at home as they were on the road last year. So we'll only have 3 games against the Reds to kind of see that. So tiny sample size initially, but I think from a bigger picture, first month standpoint, that'll be worth watching.
We've got the Mariners coming in too. So we've got 6 games before you head to LA for that.
See, I'm already thinking ahead to LA. I'm not thinking about home.
It's all good.
My head's in California.
The only thing I challenge you on anything is, again, they've just taken more walks than they did, and walks are park neutral, and so you're creating more traffic. And what they're able to do on the base pass, I think they're going to squeeze more runs, even if they're not hitting more homers per se at Globe Life Field. Though I'd like to see, with another left-handed hitter in the lineup in Nimmo, I'd like to think that they could take advantage of right field a little bit more.
I'd like to say, before we get out of here, we hadn't even mentioned Andrew McCutchen, who's been a revelation for the Rangers and has played great, and it still looks really good. He's made an impact in the game. I'm wondering at this point, does Jock Peterson already have to worry about keeping his job as a DH?
Yes. I mean, I think, although let me say this, I think Jock's at bats have been pretty good. I know the results haven't been quite there, but he had a nice sac fly yesterday to optimize that first inning. He's had a walk. But yeah, I think, look, the Rangers are going to want to see performance, and he's a guy who's on the last year of his contract, and They kept Mark Canna on a minor league deal, and he's out in Arizona staying ready. And so I think you put everything together, and I think the Rangers aren't yet convinced that Jock is in a position where he's going to significantly bounce back. So I think that watch is there. But I think if there's anybody who should be right now sweating a little bit more, it's Josh Young, because his at-bats have simply not been good. He's gotten 2 balls in the air in the first 4 games. His chase rate is really high, and it just hasn't looked good to this point. I would not be surprised if before the end of the weekend, Ezekiel Duran gets at least 1 start against a right-handed pitcher somewhere along the way. And that would be a message being sent at that point.
That's a harder thing to, and I know that he has struggled, and that's a hard thing to do. But it's just a lot easier to dump. Even though Jock Peterson's making $18 million, you're not paying either Canna or McCutchen anything. So it's just a wash.
It's the sunk money thing. The money on Jock is already spent. I think the Rangers want to see process, man. They want to see progress in the process, and I don't think they feel like they've seen that from Josh early in the season.
Yeah, but he still plays a position. That's the thing about Jock. When McCutchen hits a ball in the hole, was that last night or night before, legs it out. That's a big play. Jock's not legging that out. And that's kind of the issue too, is this team need to be more athletic. And they have made themselves more athletic this year.
Yeah, all of that is true. 100%. I mean, look, you're not making a statement that's untrue. I think that Jock is under some pressure to perform fairly early, but I think he's going to get at least a month's worth of runway to kind of get on track. I think that's the benefit of having a 15-year, tried and true career. I think there is some concern that they want to see immediate progress from Josh Young.
All right. That's going to do it for our podcast this week. We'll be back next week for more, and we'll be having on Joe Hoyt to talk about the draft with us next week as we get closer to that date, April the 23rd, I believe it is. That'll be fun to see what the Cowboys do there. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.